All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing well today. Talking about everybody's favorite topic, Concord. Live service games. Train wrecks. Hope you guys are looking forward to the conversation today. But I do hope everybody is doing well. You came for the Concord and live service dumpster fire garbage burial. IBG can't get away from Concord. Everywhere I go, man, it follows. What's interesting to think, though, is, in all seriousness, today will very likely, I can't say definitively, I can't see the future, but today will likely be the last day we ever talk about this game and the studio that made it in a meaningful way. In the future, Concord will probably be brought up as a reference point, you know, when it calls for it. What happened to Firewalk Studios will likely be brought up again as a reference point when it calls for it. But really, this is, I would say, like the final kind of send off, because I mean, it's not just over, it's like over. I mean, it's done. There's nothing else that can, well, technically we still have the secret level episode, but putting that aside, you know, that'll be it. That'll be the last thing we ever get from Concord. That is until Sony announces Concord 2. But yeah, we're going to talk about the situation here. We did talk about it quite a bit in yesterday's stream, but the difference is a lot of people missed that conversation. And sure, they could have went back and watched it, but I think a lot of people, they want to partake in the conversation live as it's happening. And we were like halfway through the stream when the news dropped. So we're going to cover it like a little bit more in depth today. And we do have like a little bit more information that came out. Nothing like too surprising, nothing we haven't like really heard before, but Michael Lynch, you're saying Herman had a hand in Killzone and the Horizon games. Those were great. One bad game does not make me lose confidence in him. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, Michael. We're going to talk about Herman Holst. You know, I put in my title here, like, who is to blame for this mess? And that's something that I'm noticing, is that some people are pointing out that it seems like nobody at Sony is seemingly taking accountability. And look, I mean, I don't know what the expectation is. Like, Sony's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You're not going to see the people who were truly responsible for this. Like, even if it was Jim Ryan, it's not like you're going to see Jim Ryan suddenly come out with a letter, like, or something, you know, and be like, guys, I take full responsibility and I'm sorry. I mean, you know, he retired. If the most accountability somebody like Jim Ryan probably could realistically take has already been taken, in that he was asked to step down gracefully, and he understood that, okay, I messed up and it's time for me to go. And that's about it. That's likely the best you're going to get. I mean, the idea of like Herman Holst coming out and being like, I'm so sorry, probably not going to happen. It would be nice to see that, but you know, I'm sure Sony and everybody involved with this train wreck wants to forget about it as quickly as possible. But yeah, we're gonna get into that. And Michael, like I said, we'll talk about what we can expect going forward from Herman. But what you're pointing out is true, and it is worth keeping in mind that, you know, at times like this, people will forget or ignore anything good that came before, because of, you know, of just how bad what is happening right now is. And it's tough because, I mean, you know, you got to be careful when you're kind of, it's like a tightrope. You can't really say, well, we shouldn't be this upset about Concord, or we shouldn't be this upset with Herman because he did Killzone. But it's like, all right, when's the last time he did a Killzone? It's like, all right, well, like 2013. But what about Horizon? It's like, all right, yeah. But I mean, it has to do with, like, I guess, a track record. you know? And this is definitely, I would say, something that Herman is probably not proud of, probably very unhappy about, because it's going to follow him around now for the rest of his career. Same thing with, anybody else that was involved with it. But like I said, man, I just hope he learned a valuable lesson. That's like, at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? Like, this is done. This is over. We're still going to delve into the details for people who may have missed it yesterday, but the most important takeaway is, like, did you learn your lesson? Like, what did you learn? How are you going to do better going forward? Because it needs to be a lot better than this. And hopefully, who knows? Who knows? Maybe Herman will be the one to deliver that big success. But here's what I can say, right? If Herman continues to screw up, right, like with future games, he's not going to be in this position for very long. And that's another important thing that I think is worth noting here, is that Herman might be on thin ice right now. And if he is, he knows it. And because of that, there's going to be this kind of pressure where it's like he's going to have to deliver. So in a way, I'm kind of hopeful that he'll be able to, like, get it together again, learn from the disaster that is Concord, and be able to say, we have to we have to do much better than this, and that's going to be our focus. Where did we go wrong? There might be some rants today. I don't know. The Drum Man, you're saying, hi, MBG. I really thought you said you wouldn't talk about Concord several months ago. Why are you revisiting this failed company? So, two things here, Drum Man. Number one, if there's one thing that I've learned, is that going forward, I'm never going to state that I'm not going to talk about a topic. I've done this in the past, and believe me, it only bites you in the ass. I'm never going to say that again. There's never going to be a topic that I say I'm not going to talk about this again. I'm just not going to say that. Not going to make that statement. Number two, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. Like, there's just no way we can't talk about this. I'm not saying it's the most exciting thing. It's not exciting. It's the opposite of exciting. But it's a big deal. I think a lot of people forgot that, dude, Sony acquired the studio literally last year. It's been 1 year. They've owned the studio for 1 year, and the entire studio is being shut down now. That's wild. That's wild, man. I also want to point out that, coming from the PlayStation side of things, PlayStation fans have criticized the shit out of Xbox and out of Microsoft. And the reason why I'm just throwing this out here is because I do, and I'm not accusing anybody here in the chat of this. I don't think there's anybody here that's like this. But I have come across it in certain spaces where there are, like, certain PlayStation fans that are like, no, you can't talk, you shouldn't talk about that. Like, we're not going to, it's like when Xbox has, like, a disaster like Redfall. I mean, we are, like, beating the shit out of it, out of Xbox, we're really just going to town. But then when Sony has something happen that's even worse, like by far worse, and even more devastating, to the point where it shuts down an entire studio, you see some of these people where they're like, well, that's a real shame. Hopefully Sony doesn't make that mistake again. It's just like just a complete change of tune. I'm not about that. People have accused me of that, but I think anybody who's been watching me long enough, they know, like, I don't really do that. If there's something that I feel is being overblown, I'll tell you it's being overblown. But the situation with Concord, I'm here to tell you, like, it's not being overblown at all. Like, if anything, I don't know. If anything, it's something that people I'm not saying people should like continue to hold on to it and constantly bring it up like me. But I just hope it's something that people don't forget anytime soon, because the moment they forget about it, it's going to repeat itself. I'm not saying it'll be Sony doing it. I don't think Sony's ever going to forget about it, but it's not being overblown but misrepresented like crazy. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a problem that I would say is just applicable across the board. It's not like that. I don't think that's exclusive to Concord or even the conversation around PlayStation. There is a lot of misrepresentation and just people conflating things, and people, again, kind of twisting certain things and distorting them, and it's unfortunate because they have a lot of influence and they end up kind of making people stray too far away from actually understanding like what is the core and the crux of the problem here. Because if you can't identify that, your chances of being able to partake in a constructive dialogue go down to almost zero. Not going to lie, MBG rants are becoming more riveting than Sony's games as of late. Damn. But let's go over, I'll give you a brief rundown. So first, we have a blog post from Herman Hulst. Well, this is actually an internal email that was sent out, but Sony made it public for everybody to view. An update from PlayStation Studios, again, written by Herman Hulst. It says below is an internal email from Herman Hulst, CEO of the Studio Business Group, Sony Interactive Entertainment, distributed today to SIE employees. Again, we read this yesterday, but not everybody was able to tune in. Today, I want to share some important updates from Sony Interactive Entertainment's Studio Business Group. We consistently evaluate our games portfolio and status of our projects to ensure we are meeting near and long-term business priorities. As part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen SIE's studio business, we've had to make a difficult decision relating to two of our studios, Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios. Expanding beyond PlayStation devices and crafting engaging online experiences alongside our single-player games are key focal areas for us as we evolve our revenue streams. We need to be strategic, though, in bringing our games to new platforms and recognize when our games fall short of meeting player expectations. While mobile remains a priority growth area for the studio business, we are in the very early stage of our mobile efforts. To achieve success in this area, we need to concentrate on titles that are in line with PlayStation Studios' pedigree and have the potential to reach more players globally. So I just want to point out here, I'm kind of liking what he's saying. To achieve success, we need to concentrate on titles that are in line with PlayStation Studios' pedigree. So acknowledging that both Firewalk and apparently Neon Koi, these studios were not up to snuff. With the refocused approach, Neon Koi will close, and its mobile action game will not be moving forward. I want to express my gratitude to everyone at Neon Koi for their hard work and endless passion to innovate. Regarding Firewalk, as announced in early September, certain aspects of Concord were exceptional, but others did not land with enough players. See, I'm not trying to focus too much on what's being said here, but like this does the opposite of giving me confidence. I'm not saying I'm not saying I expect Herman Hulst in an internal email to be like, this game was shit. Like, no. But certain aspects of Concord were exceptional. I'm sorry, they were not. There was nothing. The only thing exceptional about Concord, and I'm not saying this facetiously, is how spectacularly it failed. Like, that's it. This is the opposite. There was nothing. If there was something exceptional about Concord, it would exist right now. It would have an audience, even if it was a small one. Seeing stuff like this still being said about it internally is like, what are you talking about? It did not land well enough with players. As a result, we took the game offline. We have spent considerable time these past few months exploring all of our options. After much thought, we have determined the best path forward is to permanently sunset the game and close the studio. I want to thank all of Firewalk for their craftsmanship, creative spirit, and dedication. The PvP first-person shooter genre is a competitive space that's continuously evolving, and unfortunately, we did not hit our targets with this title. We will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. So, listen, something that's important to underline here with this email is that they're trying to communicate very clearly that, guys, Concord died and we're shutting the studio down. Our live service plans are not changing. They're saying they're going to learn a lesson from this, which is good. That's, again, all we can hope for. But I think that there was maybe this kind of hope that if Concord died, maybe Sony would stop with the live service approach. That's not going to happen. But MBG, certain aspects of Concord were exceptional. For example, it was one of the only UE5 games that had consistent 60 FPS with no bugs or stutters. Okay, well, all right. I guess that's from a technical level. Maybe that's true. And maybe, maybe if there's like anything they can salvage from the game, from the development side of things, is like, the people who were working on this game on a technical level, the engineers, they knew what they were doing. Maybe that can benefit other studios and other games. But yeah, because I don't want to take every. I'm a believer in giving credit where it's due, and sure, as far as I'm aware, the game didn't have any technical problems, and it was a UE5 game. So, all right, so there is that. But it is important to understand that Sony is making it very clear, even in this email, where they basically are acknowledging that this is a failure at a very, 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 very high level, that they're still all in with live service. And that's not going to, what happened with Concord is not going to stop them from pursuing this. And I want to make something clear here. This doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's really only going to be a bad thing if Sony doesn't actually learn the lessons that they needed to learn here. If Sony doesn't realize by now that you need to take a more, I guess maybe if you want to use the term traditional, I don't know that this is the best term to use. It's the only one that's coming to mind right now, but you might want to take a more traditional approach to the type of live service games you're like, basically don't try so hard. I know that sounds antithetical to like, well, what do you mean? Don't they need to try hard to succeed? I think there is such a thing as like, you're trying too hard. And because of it, you're turning things into things they shouldn't be. And I think like Concord, it's an example of a game that tried too hard. It's like, it's so inorganic in a way where it's like the whole premise of what this game is going to be. It's like, we want to make this one of the most successful live service games ever made. So we're going to basically check off every single box that needs to be checked off. And surely, as long as all those boxes are checked off, it'll be a winner, right? It can't fail if we're doing it that way. And it's like, see, that's what you're trying way too hard. You're trying too hard to just follow a formula and follow a template. And the result you ended up getting is a pile of generic, from a Western developer that wanted to make it clear that we're a Western studio. Don't you love our character designs? And it's like, again, I always kind of look at Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 did not try hard. And maybe I'm using the wrong terms here. When I say try hard, I'm not saying they didn't put a shit ton of effort and hard work into it. I don't want people to be confused. I'm not saying that. What I mean by try hard is like they were not focused on the wrong things. They were not worried about, is Helldivers 2 going to be the big success? Like, maybe you could even use the term ambition. Maybe the over ambition and the eagerness for that sweet, sweet live service recurrent revenue. The rush, the gold rush. I think that's what is fucking everything up, where it's like, they're like, well, why are you checking off these boxes? Why are you taking this approach? Because you want to succeed as quickly as possible. So surely the way we succeed as quickly as we possibly can is by just doing things the way they've already been done. And that's what's kind of funny is like literally nothing about Concord was fresh. It's a 5v5 hero shooter, not fresh. Not unique. Okay, what about the characters? Aren't they unique? No, it's literally trying to be Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm sorry, but that already exists. There's even a Guardians of the Galaxy single player game with better dialogue and better characters and more interesting interactions. So no, that's not unique. That's not interesting. And that was, I think, it's funny looking back when we first saw that like trailer, the cinematic trailer at the State of Play. That's the first thing I was like, why are they? This is Guardians of the Galaxy. What are they doing? There's just nothing about it that's unique. And because of that, you combine that with the fact that they were trying to have the widest possible appeal. They wanted to make a game for everyone. Kareem Ali, you're saying, hi, BG, I don't condone layoffs, but they reap what they sowed. They made a garbage product that nobody wanted, and they talked down to customers, and Herman was so out of touch, and I feel no remorse. I mean, yeah, I try to, like, be somewhat feeling of the fact that, people got to go through some shit, but I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff, or at least I'm not going to pretend to feel things that I don't really feel. And I'll be honest with you, man, like I'm pretty much in the same boat, Kareem. Like if I was part of that studio, dude, and I became aware of the fact like, oh my God, these people are in their own fucking world. If I saw what was coming, and I realized like this is basically like a mini cult, like everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid and then they're all, it's like you can't have any outside thoughts, right? It's got to be like a hive mind. I would have fucking left. I'd be like, I'm going to find another studio to work for, dude. This is bullshit. Like you guys are making something that's going to be a joke. But I don't know, man, when people really believe in something, and that's, it's the power of belief, bro. When people really believe in something and they're not willing to hear external criticism, I mean, we see the results all around us all the time. But this is a rare example in the gaming, not a rare, but for Sony, I would say it's like a rare example of like, oh my God. Like how far up your own ass do you have to be to have not seen this outcome? Like, it's just the thing that truly is, I will not be able to get over this. And it will be something that always lingers in the back of my mind when I see what PlayStation does going forward is they thought this was going to be a mega hit, bro. Like they didn't even approach it like maybe it'll find some success. We just want it to do okay. Like, no, they really thought like this is it. This is like the live service equivalent of our God of War, of our Last of Us, or some shit. And that's the part that blows my mind, where it's like, what gives you, what even remotely gives you that impression? That's what I don't get. And that's what scares the shit out of me about, maybe Herman just needs to start playing live service games, dude. Maybe that's what it boils down to. Maybe when we talk about him being out of touch, because I could kind of understand, and I'm stretching this, but I could kind of understand if you don't actually play games, or at least you don't actually play multiplayer games, you don't play live service games, and you don't know deeply, like on a deeper level, like what makes these games tick, what appeals to people in these games. And all you're doing is just reading charts and reading data and again, checking boxes, and it's very kind of artificial and robotic and just not natural. I feel like this is where Herman, the most, like what he should do, at this point should be mandated, he should sit down and play as many live service games as possible. Not like, forever, but just get firsthand experience in playing these games and experiencing them and beginning to have some kind of understanding of like, oh, because I really wonder, like, Killzone was never a live service game. It was a multiplayer. It had a multiplayer shooter component, PvP component. And maybe that's another thing that's so shocking, right? Is we did talk about, like, Herman is the one that was responsible for Killzone. And he knows shooters. And that's what makes it interesting when we look at Concord. It's like the shooting didn't feel bad necessarily, but everything else did. So maybe, I don't know, he was just sold on the shooting and the pretty graphics and the technical side, and he was like, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. Oliver, you're saying, hope Concord will stay a bright example of what happens when you force agendas instead of making fun, instead of making a fun game for your fans to make you money, not Black Rock ranking. Well, I mean, I don't want to assume too much, There's a part of me, the more optimistic part, that wants to say Sony, they get it now. They get it, But we really won't know for like the next couple of years. Many of the artists who worked on Concord talked about how the vast majority of the art and stuff came together in a few months before launch. Herman was going off the gameplay alone, basically. Fascinating. That's very interesting, if true. I mean, I guess I could kind of see how if Herman, when he was checking this game out, basically he was just seeing the core gameplay loop, the basic overall design, but had no idea like what it was actually going to look like. That's just hard to believe, man. Because like even if that's true, like that makes me like, why would Sony be so willing to take such a risk if they were still so kind of in the dark? Because what you're pointing to here, it kind of it creates this kind of feeling of, oh well, they just didn't really know. It's like, well, shit. I mean, that's also concerning because it's like, why would you invest so heavily into something that you don't actually know what the end, like you don't actually have a good idea of what the end. I don't know. I from a game design standpoint, I guess it's like, oh, the gameplay is really fun. The bones of this game are really good. So worst case scenario, it'll just do okay. I kind of get that. And who knows, maybe it was the perfect storm. I mean, I try to think of a world where, like, what if Concord didn't look the way it looked? What if it looked very different? What if the designs were way better? What if just aesthetically speaking, and the agenda side too, like pushing certain agendas, that wasn't really present in the game either. How, what would the outcome look like? I still don't think the game would have been a big hit. I think Sony would have been surprised in that, oh, I guess this wasn't the next big thing. But I don't think it would have like done this, I could be wrong. Maybe it still would have flopped pretty bad. Maybe it still would have been like, people would have been like, dude, this is bland and kind of not fun. But yeah, it's just a lot of what ifs, and the what ifs, I don't know, they matter too much because we know what is, and this is what is. What if it was just all hot women? What if? I can tell you right now, if Concord was just all like hot, busty women, it would have been a big hit. Sony would be propped up right now, bro. A lot of people inside of Sony as a, California HQ, they would be very upset. But I don't know, man. There's some studios and developers out there that are beginning to realize, like, if we just put really sexy women in our game, I think it will be okay. And we could talk about the ethical side of that, but I don't want to hear that bullshit when we're talking about business. See, that's the part that gets me, is like, these companies try to pretend like it's the right thing to do. We're trying to be ethical. Like, no, shut the fuck up. Like, you're in it for the money. Stop pretending, please. It's sickening. So listen, let's just get down to it. You want the money, then you got to do what's got to be done. What ethics? They're trying to sell games. Well, there you go. Exactly. Maybe that's the problem. We don't have to think about the ethics. We don't have to think about the morals. Just make a game that people want to play. Let the market decide. And I feel like these days, when you look at some of the most successful stuff, the market's not, it's not linear necessarily, There are like sub-markets within the market. There's different genres you can appeal to. Make your decision. I don't know, man. It's just, Sony just bet on the worst horse, dude. Not even the wrong horse. They bet on the worst horse. That's what it's like, how unlucky could you be? Like, you could have bet on any other live service game. I mean, maybe it's the law of averages. Helldivers 2, fastest selling PlayStation Studios game in history. Concord, worst selling in history. Law of averages. Kareem Ali, you're saying one thing is for certain. Haven is probably shaking right now, and they're going to get the axe next. I don't want to be such a... Maybe I'm just in a bitter mood today. I don't know. But the more I think about Haven, the more I'm like, it's over. I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to... I don't say that with animosity because I haven't played their game, but it's just not going to work. Like, because I'm trying to think to myself, like, what could they do? There's one thing they could do. This is it. If Haven's game, if the next trailer they show doesn't have like busty, sexy women with like, with an implication that you can buy new skins, if it doesn't have that, I'm sorry, your studio is gonna get shut down. I don't make the rules. Haven has a chance because of who runs that studio. You know what's funny is people don't realize that Jade Raymond, listen, I have nothing against Jade Raymond, but after like doing some digging over the last couple years since I found out they were acquired, I realized she hasn't produced anything of consequence in like well over a decade. I think her last main credit was the first Watch Dogs. And even that wasn't considered like anything special. I think it was considered good, but not like, See, Oliver, I mean, I see what you're doing, right? Because it's like, oh, they could do that. Not going to work. Sorry. I mean, I know you're joking, but it's like, no, that's not going to work. You could try, but don't be surprised when your studio gets shut down. We just need to... Saying Watch Dogs 1 is good? No, I'm not. I didn't say it wasn't good. I'm saying it's good. I'm just saying I don't think it's considered... I don't think Watch Dogs 1 is looked back on like, man, that's like one of the... Like, I think Watch Dogs is looked back on as like, that's one of the games that I had some fun with. I don't think people look back on it as like, that's like one of the best games I ever played, bro. What an amazing... Like, one of the best made games ever. I don't think that's how people look at Watch Dogs. And I'm not saying that to like shit on Haven Studio and Jade Raymond, but it's like, I'm not blaming them, man. Like, I don't even blame Haven Studio. I'm just gonna say, like, I'm not blaming them. Like, you want to make that type of game, make that. Same with Concord and Firewalk. Like, you want to make that game, make that game. I blame Sony. Like, Sony, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? Like, why do you think these are winners? Josh Z with a super chat. Thank you, Josh. He says, oh, by the way, Josh, I got that video you sent me earlier and I started watching. I didn't finish it. So I'm about halfway through, but super interesting video. Gotta say, I'm like really interested to see the second half. But you're saying I'm most surprised that the studio was axed. It seems like a short-sighted business move, like canceling The Last of Us Online. This is brought up in the video I sent you. It's a bit long-winded, but informative. Yeah, I haven't gotten to that part yet, Josh, but I'm very interested. I never came across this. I don't think I've come across this channel before, but yeah, this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. I mean, he's a lawyer, and I'll have to talk more about it when I finish it. But I mean, I don't know. Is Sony short-sighted? Is it possibly a short-sighted decision to shut the studio down already? And you mentioned like The Last of Us Online. I think Sony is short-sighted when it comes to live service, and I think that comes from this intense. Again, there's a rush. Like, they feel like they need to find that success very, very, very soon. And it's like, it's not going to work that way, man. It's not. Like, it's how I think, how the fuck do we see a situation unfold where you had Naughty Dog working on a AAA live service Last of Us game for 4 years with a AAA budget? Josh, by the way, I don't know if you have the video, if you want to link it, because people are asking for it. It's a good video. I'd definitely say link it in the chat. People can watch it. But I don't know how you get Naughty Dog to work on a live service AAA Last of Us game for 4 years. Put a AAA budget into it, and then the reason why it gets canceled is, turns out Naughty Dog doesn't want to support a live service game. Like, how is that possible? You know what I mean? It's like, I can understand if it was bad and it was like, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to make a live service game. I could understand that more than I understand this, because this is just a pure lack of like, what do you mean? Like, I don't get it. Like, who didn't inform you over the last 4 years that you're going to have to support this game? Unless Naughty Dog changed their mind. I mean, I'm just trying to think of something that makes sense, where it's like, did Naughty Dog agree to it, but then at the last minute they're like, you know what, never mind, actually, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. And that like caused a whole meltdown. We'll never know. All we know is what Naughty Dog said, and that is that they're not going to be able to support the game, and so therefore they're not going to do the game. And maybe that, honestly, maybe that's where Sony wasn't short-sighted. Maybe Sony did kind of have, I'm talking from a business standpoint, the right approach, where Sony said, we want a guaranteed big hit live service game. Who do we go to for that? You know what? I got it. Naughty Dog. Good old Naughty Dog. And you know what's funny? The way people talk, and the way people talked about the game, who did play it or who knew about it, they all say the same thing. Like, this was going to be big. Like, this was going to be the game. And maybe Naughty Dog knew it. And maybe that's what scared them off, is they just realized, holy shit, this is going to be the game. And we're going to be locked in. And it's in that case, I mean, Sony, I feel like it's one of these things where you can't destroy your studio by forcing them into this position if they don't want to be in it. But I understand why you would consider doing that, because it's like, if you want, and we've talked about that, like the idea of, well, what if we just let another studio kind of handle the game and make the content for the game and all this shit? And it's definitely possible and it could be doable, but I just don't know that. Think of it like this. If the first if like The Last of Us Online is released, thank you, Josh. If The Last of Us Online is released and it's amazing and it's got that Naughty Dog level quality and people love it, they love the characters and the missions and they love the whole thing, right? And then Naughty Dog's like, okay, so now we're giving this to another studio. Like, we'll give it to Fire Sprite or whoever. Nixis, doesn't matter. And they're going to support it as a live service. And then suddenly the quality of it just drops. Suddenly the new missions and the writing and you know what I mean? Like, if it's like going to have an ongoing story and whatnot, which I kind of assume that's what they were going for, it just suddenly turns into shit, because it's like, yeah, Naughty Dog's not making any. They only made the base game, you know? I could kind of see how that would also be worrisome, where it's like, well, like Naughty Dog, we kind of wanted you to do it because you're the best. Like, you're the ones. You know the world of The Last of Us. You know what direction to go in. I don't know, man. It's just I don't know what timeline we slipped into, man. That this is our reality. We could have had The Last of Us Online. We could be playing it right now. We could be looking forward to season 1 or 2. And instead, we're looking at Firewalk getting shut down and Concord being sunsetted. And it's like, what went wrong, man? The gaming industry in 2024. Guarantee factions would be facing issues as well. It's possible. Yeah, I don't want to. I at least feel confident enough that if factions was not as good as we had hoped, it would still have a player base and it would at least be supported for at least 1 year. Like, it would have been something that Sony could have made some money off of, where it's like, let's just sell it as a $40 game. We'll support it for a year. And if it goes to shit and it just really isn't working out, then, you don't have to sunset it, but we'll just let them know, like, we got to move on now, guys. Like, oh God, it drives me nuts that it's like, that could have happened. That, like, what's stopping that from happening? Just put it out for $40. Imagine if it flopped. Well, it's just hard for me to imagine that, because it's like, the game would have been $40. So it's already cheaper than what you would expect to pay for a new Naughty Dog game. Maybe it's a little bit, like, even if it was just okay, I don't know, man. Could it have been that bad? You play The Last of Us 2. The mechanics are there, man. The mechanics are, like, how could it be bad? How could that not be fun? If you play Factions 1, I don't know how many people still play that today, but even that still holds up. Like, it's just fun, man. It's a fun game. It's got a good gameplay loop, and I'm not saying other aspects of it couldn't have been bad. Like, maybe it would have been lacking in content, or the story side of it would have been very weak, or maybe there wouldn't have been enough. Maybe they're just the overall depth wouldn't have been there, and that all would have been like docking points. But I'm telling you, man, it's The Last of Us. Like, it's still something people would be willing to try to rally around. And even if it was like, you know what, guys, this is a bit rough and a bit rocky, I'm telling you, it's Naughty Dog, it's The Last of Us. They would have enough people giving enough feedback to where, if Naughty Dog was willing to listen, they would be able to help reshape it a little bit and get it up, like, running at full speed, or however you want to look at it. And I get it. That's what a lot of people hate about live service, where it's like, you got to kind of wait for it to get better. But I'm just saying, dude, listen, I'm just saying that alternative to what I'm seeing right now sounds amazing. You get what I'm saying? Like, that sounds so much better than what we're actually getting right now. And I'm just depressed. Just depressed about the whole situation, really. PlayStation gamers only want remakes and remasters. They don't want original games. Ron, that's wrong. I'm not even going to bother explaining why that's wrong. You know why that's wrong. I know why. Everybody knows why. What you just said isn't true. Turn that frown upside down. No. But, I mean, maybe there's an alternate timeline somewhere where Concord was a huge success for Sony. Maybe that exists somewhere, you know, alternate universe. Naughty Dog has too much pride to make something like Factions free, which is what everybody wants in a live service game. Subtext, thank you for the super chat, buddy. You're saying, what do you think was the problem with Factions? Insider said it played great and was fun. Maybe overly focused more on story content versus monetization. Ironic, they bet on Concord as the moneymaker. I mean, it sounds to me, subtext, because I'm trying to like think of it more holistically, like from the time we heard Naughty Dog talk about it all the way up to its cancellation and the reason why it got canceled. It sounds to me like Jason Schreier, he said that Bungie basically gave Naughty Dog advice. And Jason Schreier left it at that. But one of the things Jason Schreier made sure to convey is that Bungie didn't decide anything about The Last of Us. Like, they didn't decide, and nor did they, like, tell Sony. Like, Bungie didn't go to... We thought Bungie went to Sony and was like, shut that shit down, bro. No. Apparently, it was a matter of Bungie gave Naughty Dog advice, where it's like, if you're going down this road of live service, and you know what it sounds like to me? As we slowly find more of these pieces and put them together, it sounds like Bungie scared Naughty Dog off. That's what it sounds like. Sounds like Bungie... It sounds like Naughty Dog underestimated and was not aware as a studio, like, what would be expected for a successful live service. The irony here is that Bungie has failed. And so the idea of a studio that ultimately couldn't figure out how to properly manage their own live service, giving advice from their own experience to a studio that is just about to enter live service, and then they end up scaring off that studio because it sounds bad and nightmarish. I think that's what bothers me the most about the situation with The Last of Us Online and Naughty Dog, is that, like, who says, like, what gives... Why should Naughty Dog be taking advice from anybody when it comes to them going into the live service space? Like, what would be so bad about them just saying, here's how we're going to do it? What the fuck would be so bad about that? Maybe that's exactly what we need. None of this, well, we got to make sure we're doing this and doing that and checking the boxes and doing what everybody else is doing. This is the expectation. No. Maybe instead of that, why don't you just do it the way you think is best? And maybe that's exactly what we need. Something a little bit different, something to shake it up, something not so run-of-the-mill. Because you know what? The way Bungie did it, it only worked for so long, and then it blew up in their face. Now look, they're a shell of their former selves. So if anything, again, this might be the exact time where it's like, we need, if not Naughty Dog, we just need some live service games that are willing to do things a little bit differently. I think maybe, you know, the biggest... There was going to be a battle royale, apparently. There was going to be a battle pass. They weren't going to call... I don't think they were going to call it a battle pass. I don't know what they would have called it, but I get why they feel like we got to do these things, right? Like, this is how you do live service, right? And maybe that would have worked, but it's just like, I don't know. The only other thing I'll say before I read Josh's super chat as well, the only other thing I'll say is maybe what ultimately happened is Bungie was the one to give Naughty Dog this advice, because maybe what Naughty Dog wanted to do is exactly what Bungie tried to do, which is we want to constantly create expansions that continue the story. And maybe what Bungie ended up telling Naughty Dog is that that's very, very difficult. Like, that is, you're going to need to treat every expansion almost like a new game. And maybe Naughty Dog didn't quite understand, maybe we didn't really think about that. Maybe we underestimated what the expectation is, where it's like, if you're going to have a continual story with expansions, it's going to require maybe a lot more upkeep and dev time than you anticipated. I don't know. I'm trying to consider all the different angles, you know. But Josh, you're saying one thing is clear to me. Sony has a lot of backwards gaming priorities. They want Nintendo's success without realizing that they spent decades cultivating at least 10 plus franchises and rotating them. Yeah, it does seem like Sony, from what I've gathered, Sony has this fixation on wanting to, when you talk about like replicating Nintendo's success, what Sony wants that Nintendo has in terms of success is the strength of their IP. Is the fact that like they have, like you're saying, about 10, maybe like a dozen intellectual properties, but some of them have been, you know, they've been handled in such a way where it's like, when we release a new game in this, you know, in this franchise or with this IP, it's going to clean up. And I'm not just talking like it's going to sell like 5 or 6 million. No, like it's going to clean up. It's going to sell 20 million. It's going to sell 30 million. It's going to sell more than that. There is like, if you're Sony, you definitely are being kept up at night by that. Because you're like, I don't fucking get it. Like, we have our IP, like we have God of War, we have The Last of Us, we have Horizon. Like, why aren't our games selling like that? And I don't know, maybe with what we're seeing with Astro, maybe that's Sony like basically being like, maybe we can. Let's do it. Let's try to turn Astro into the next Mario. Whether or not that'll work, I mean, good luck. I'm not saying it's not possible in the long run, but you got a long ways to go. If you can get Astro to be anywhere near Mario, you're on the right path. But yeah, I kind of agree with that. Josh, I just think that, I think Sony is something that seems clear to me about Sony over the last like 5 to 7 years, but especially the last couple of years, like the last 3 in particular. They act like they're starved, honestly, but they're very hungry for a new level of success that they keep believing. And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with believing this, but they believe they're this close. Like they can do it. Like it's like, it's almost like, that's where you kind of confuse, like there's confident, then there's overconfident, aka arrogance, you know? And Sony seems to struggle with that, where they do want to have this new level of success, this newfound success, and they want to achieve that new level of growth, and they want to reach a position of, I'll say, where they become untouchable, but there's not really anything around them that can conceivably compete anytime soon. And I just think they're misguided in their approach. I think that they're making the mistake that so many other companies make, And that is what your ambition requires an unbelievable amount of time and commitment. And if you're afraid of shareholders running off because you got to turn to them and say, this is going to be a process, it's going to take a long time, but the end result will be worth it. If you're afraid of shareholders running off and growth not really being there during those times, then you don't necessarily deserve that level of success. Because sure, you may be able to look at other games and other companies and other brands that they did it. They got lucky. Yeah, they got lucky. They fell into it. They stumbled into it. And maybe that could happen to you, but don't assume that's going to happen to you. Assume the opposite. Assume that it's going to take you over a decade to get anywhere close to that. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you do stumble onto it in the next 3 years. But that to me is what that to me is the problem with this, where they're so fixated on being successful that I feel like that is interfering with the natural process of, like, Herman. I would, like, my advice to Herman Hulst at this point would be, don't assume anything at this point, bro. I mean, you got to use your judgment, but don't assume that game that you think can't be the big hit, don't assume it will or won't. Just don't assume anymore. But definitely, at the very least, pay attention to what the fans, like the core fans that are here, like the most loyal people, the people that will be here through thick and through thin, pay attention to what they're saying, because they're going to be your backbone when the shit hits the fan. But if the shit hits the fan enough times, you'll start losing that backbone. They'll start leaving. You can't just burn through that goodwill. And so that would really be my advice, where the biggest mistake Sony made, flat out, with Concord, the biggest mistake is the assumption it will succeed. Absolutely the biggest mistake they made. They should have been conservative. They should have been skeptical. They should have taken it slow. They should have been very hesitant to invest anywhere near as much money as they did. And they did the opposite. They didn't do any of those things because they truly were they were overconfident. They were like, this is it. This is too big to fail. This is too good to fail. And it's like, bro, what on God's green earth gives you that notion? Like, what is giving you that? Is it the pedigree of the developers working on this? Because if that's the case, like, man, that's not enough for this. Subtext, you're saying a challenge with Sony copying Nintendo is that Sony's biggest IPs take years to make. Nintendo can make a little 2D spin-offs, sports/party games, etc. Well, this is where Sony, I think, needs to, maybe Sony's arrogance is getting in the way a little bit, where it's like, they can do that too, bro. At least I think they can. I'm not saying it can be done on the same exact level, but there's nothing stopping Sony from, like, deciding, like, we're going to do some more spinoffs. And we're going to, maybe, listen, Sony needs to get a little bit more comfortable with licensing out some of their IP. The studio's looking for work. I mean, I understand it's risky business because you don't want to tarnish the reputation, and I don't know, man, yeah. I mean, there is the whole graphical fidelity side of things as well, and I understand that does get in the way. Maybe Sony's just got to show a willingness to start. You want to talk about being experimental. You want to talk about taking risks, and it's like, well, what if you just take some of your older IP? Like, I'm trying to think of one that they would actually revisit. Let's just take Resistance. All right. Oh, God, I can't do that either because Insomniac definitely won't work on Resistance. All right, let's just take let's just take Killzone. You know, I know Killzone's not a great example to use right now because it's clear Sony's not doing anything with Killzone. But let's just say, you know, Sony, why don't you just say fuck it and make a less AAA version of Killzone? Maybe you make it a little bit more stylized. Maybe it doesn't have the cutting edge photorealistic graphics. And you know what? Screw it. We'll take it to another level. It's just a multiplayer game. It's just a little $20 multiplayer spinoff that took 2 years to develop. And basically, it's a return to the Killzone universe. It's not the one that everybody wanted, but it's something. It's something. And you can play multiplayer matches, and you can have, you know, you can rank up, you can unlock new weapons and unlock new stuff, unlock new gear, and then you can throw in a couple microtransactions for outfits. Listen, I'm just saying that, like, would that get some backlash? Yes, it would. Absolutely, that would get some backlash because people would be like, what the fuck is this? But if you think about it, though, what's the alternative? We're just going to do literally nothing and let it die. I'm just saying that's the level of, and maybe that can bud into something, right? Like maybe if that little $20 experimental, like, let's just see how people respond to this. If that does better than expected, then maybe, you know, if Killzone fans are like, listen, this isn't exactly what we wanted, but we're going to show our support. We're going to send you the message. Then maybe that's what wakes Sony up and they're like, you know what? Fuck, maybe we should really go back to Killzone and do something big with it. But Sony just seems they're in like another fucking world with their thought process where they're like, no, if it's not big and it's not guaranteed to be a huge hit, then we're not even going to bother. I don't know. Killzone didn't really sell well, though, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, you could, maybe there's an argument to be made that Sony, because it's kind of like what Josh was saying here, where he was kind of saying like, Nintendo has been rotating the same IP for like, or, you know, like over decades, rotating 10 IP and just really like, it's a long, like they just keep going. Sony, outside of God of War, realistically, like maybe they don't feel like they want to impose on their teams. I don't know. Nero, thank you so much for that, buddy. Nero decides to re-up his membership and rejoins Greatness Awaits. I do appreciate that support, man. Thank you for choosing to do that with your membership. Kareem Ali says, I just don't get why games can't have any edge or dark writing to them anymore. Modern games are just so soft now. It's just boring, and Sony is a victim. MBG, people are mad at Sony for making 2 Horizon games. Imagine 30 years of Horizon. Well, apparently that is what they're planning. So we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out what 30 years of Horizon looks like. Kareem, I'll be honest with you, man. I think I know why Sony is deviating and going in this direction. I mean, this idea that Sony wants to have intellectual property that is on the same level of it has the same level of recognition and hopefully sales success and just overall worldwide appeal as most of or a lot of Nintendo's IP. That's a tall order. That's a really tall order. That's really, really hard to achieve. But look at Nintendo's games. I mean, let me ask you, is Nintendo known for having that edge? Is Nintendo known for having that kind of darkness and that more, you know, I don't want to say that they don't have mature games at times. I'm just saying, like, Nintendo's more known for, like, you know, generally speaking, it's not that I don't agree with the take that they're just kids games. I don't agree with that, but they're games for, like, they actually are games for everybody. You know, they're games they're like E for everyone games mostly. Not every single one of them, but that's really, you know, when you think of the most successful Nintendo games, they are games that, you know, they can have, in terms of like maturity, more depth to them than you might have thought originally, for sure. But I just think that Sony is in this awkward place where, like, they think that they have to really try to start appealing to a wider, more general audience, if they're going to be able to have these more recognizable, more successful intellectual properties. And I think we see that. I think that's why Horizon is being just quadrupled down on, bro, because Horizon fits that bill. Sure, Horizon 1 and 2 are like graphical showcases, but let's make a stylized multiplayer game. Let's make a Lego game. Let's do even more than that, right? That's why I don't think, I mean, I don't know what the future of the God of War series looks like, but, you know, I don't think there's ever going to be a time, nor should there, where it's like suddenly God of War's kid friendly. Like, it doesn't make any sense, you know? But I don't know how I think Sony, I'm going to be honest, their ambition is what's starting to annoy me, because they're getting too ambitious for their own good. Sony wants it all. They want it all, and there's no denying that. And I'm getting tired of it, because it's like, in the process of them trying to have it all, they're burning money, and we're going to have to pay for it. That's the fucking truth, man. Like, people keep making this joke, like the Concord tax. It's like, I'm pretty sure that is going to be real if it's not already. Now there's even more urgency for Sony to make back that money. And that was not part of the plan. That's the important part. That was not part of the plan. The plan was to make the money back on the game itself. And I'm not saying I don't want multiplayer experiences from Sony. I absolutely do. I'm not going to lie. Like, I want multiplayer experiences from Sony, but I don't want this. I don't want whatever this is they're doing. Like, I'm not excited for fair games, man. Who is? The only game that I have any amount of faith in that it'll do okay, and even then I don't have that much faith in it, is Marathon. And that's it. Like, that's it. And I'm over here just thinking, like, are we even going to get a Ghost of Tsushima Legends 2? Because that was awesome. That was a great multiplayer experience. We going to get that? You know the saying about flying too close to the sun. Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm willing to watch Sony get burned as many times as it takes for them to realize, because that's my biggest fear. Like, when we talk about the situation with Firewalk, Concord being dead, the studio shutting down, Herman Hulst, listen, there's only one thing I actually am worried about right now, and this is it. That somehow, some way, somebody there inside of Sony, whose job it is to make these decisions, to plan these things out, they still don't get it. Like they still somewhere believe that it, like, oh, we, people just didn't get Concord. You know what I mean? And that's why I like, I don't mean to overanalyze and look too deeply into things, but that's why when I read that email that Sony put out, or the blog post, and Herman's like, well, some things about, the game were exceptional. It's like, I get it, like maybe from a technical standpoint, but it makes me just feel like, I don't know. I wish I could just hear a more candid conversation, which it won't happen because these conversations happen behind closed doors and board meetings and through conversations between the executives and the upper management. But I would love to know what a more candid conversation sounds like behind the scenes, where it's like the conversation, in my opinion, should go something along the lines of, this is a complete and total fucking disaster, and we really got burned, and we really fucked up, and we need to take this very seriously, and we need to really hone in on our core audience right now, and try to get, we need to touch base, because I just get this feeling. It's like, all right, well, Concord didn't work, so out with that. All right, Haven, you're up to bat. Let's go. And I feel like we're just being treated like, I don't know how to describe it, but I just feel like we're not really being considered. And I just hope that that's what changes, because if that doesn't change, Sony is going to dig themselves a hole that they're going to have a really hard time getting out of. And that's not me being overly negative towards them or being a hater. It's just like, once your core established, your most loyal fans, once they start to feel like they're really getting burned with you, they're going to start to go one by one, slowly but surely. And saying I could be overreacting. I hope I am. People were telling me I was overreacting about Concord when it was the first gameplay trailer. There were people who were telling me I was overreacting, and look at where we are. It was, dude, I went crazy when I'm like, dude, this is going to die. Like, this is dead. This is dead. And that's literally what happened. And I don't know why it's so hard, man. I don't know why it's so hard. I feel like surely it can't be this difficult. Wabu Dude, you're saying many are calling for Herman's job due to his terrible decision on Concord, but shutting down the studio was the right move. Keeping it open for a new game would have been worse, in my opinion. I get that people are upset and disappointed, but looking at the future, I see more good games coming rather than bad ones. I generally feel that way too. I mean, we have like a mix of single player and live service games. Single player, we got Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding 2, Wolverine from Sony first party, and I think that's about all we know of right now. Live service, we got Marathon and Fair Games. And to be honest, out of those 5 games, the only game that I could see being a crash and burn nightmare, unfortunately, is Fair Games. And so I am in agreement with you. That I do see more good games coming in the future. And that's where, I mean, things are still hairy, man. I hate to say that, but there is something I've noticed where I don't know if it's just maybe the internet being overly cynical. Maybe that is it, but the level of excitement and confidence is not where it should be. And that I'm not even blaming people for that. It's just like Sony cannot turn to the general market the general gaming market and say, you guys should feel more confident about what we got coming. You guys should feel better about it. It just doesn't work that way. They need to make people feel that way. And I hope they do, man. Like, and that goes for me too. I mean, Wolverine and Ghost of Yotei, both of these games, there is a divide. And I think that divide looks like, are they going to do the thing again? Or are they not? And I think both of these games have a high chance of success as long as they're just good games. But for me personally, I also find that I'm, I don't just completely disregard the concerns that people have, because I do have some of those concerns as well. I just don't jump to the immediate, I don't immediately assume that it's going to be as bad as we think or the worst, right? Sometimes I even tend to assume the opposite. But I don't want to see it either. I don't want to see the bullshit anymore. I'm tired. I'm like seriously fucking tired. Like, as much as people are tired of hearing me bitch about it, I'm just tired of seeing it. I think a lot of people are just tired of it, man. It's tiring. And I know that there are going to be people who capitalize on this. But the next step for me, bro, like, the next step for me is if things get worse than they are and they just keep moving in a certain direction, like, I'm going to fall out of gaming. But maybe not entirely, but just like I'm going to end up becoming just jaded and bitter and like unhappy with all this shit that they're doing. Because I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Like, whatever it is, it's not for me. And that's going to be a tough thing, because it's like, I really thought it would be. And I really wanted it to be. And I don't know what's going to happen. But you're saying it's so funny the amount of crying like an effing kid. I mean, well, I am coming off a bit whiny. I do agree. But it sucks, It's a shitty, this is a shitty topic. But I can't just sit here and pretend like, guys, this didn't just happen. Wobwood, you're saying, so if Fair Games is another train wreck, but Yotei, Death Stranding 2, and Wolverine are amazing, then it's all over. No, I don't think so. I think for me, it's the other way around, right? It's, okay, imagine Fair Games is another train wreck. Imagine Ghost of Yotei, they do make some decisions that people are, again, I'm not calling the game before we see it, but there is this expectation from, I don't know if it's a large group of people, but at least enough people that I'm seeing it everywhere I go with this game. There's this expectation that, Sucker Punch went full woke and they're now going to be like that kind of studio. And this game's going to end up being just one big preach fest. And I'm not assuming that. And I don't fuck it. God damn, if that's what happens, I'm going to lose it. But I think, it's too soon to assume that's what the game will be. We've only seen a little bit of it. But that's where I'm saying, like, okay, if Fair Games comes out and it's a disaster, and then Ghost of Yotei is basically frowned upon by half the people who played Ghost of Tsushima because it's just they Sucker Punch for some reason. They did buy into the whole, but what if we do this instead? Thing that continues to happen in these Western game studios. And it just basically ends up being like a much less enjoyable game because of it. And then Wolverine comes out and everybody, or at least so many, I want to say everybody, so many people have this idea that Wolverine is automatically going to be a dumpster fire because, well, Sweet Baby Inc. is involved and it's over. It's fucking over. And it's like, I find myself a bit concerned, yes, but what if it's not? You know what I mean? Like, what if it's not bad and it's actually very good? But that's where we don't know. We don't know. But to be clear, Wabu Dude, if Fair Games is like the only train wreck over the course of the next like 4 to 5 games we get, then I'm fine. Whatever. I think that overall, like, it'll be easy to ignore that because it's like, all right, well, we got all these other great games, so who cares? Fair Games, and who knows? Maybe there's some crazy chance that Fair Games is really good. I'm not anticipating that. I'm very, very skeptical, but maybe it could shock us. And it comes out and it's like, wow, actually, this is a really fun game. And actually very unique. It's possible. I think the odds are stacked against it, but it's possible. Yeah, I would just recommend not getting your hopes up necessarily. Has Sucker Punch ever made a bad game? As far as I'm aware, no. So that's why I don't anticipate that this is just suddenly going to be a not enjoyable game with a bad story and bad character writing. You're saying all those games could be absolutely amazing and huge successes and people will still tell you that they are trash and 0 to 10. It depends on how many people, I would say. Because you're right. There's always going to be those people. Like, there are people right now who don't know a fucking thing about Ghost of Yotei that have already determined, like, this is going to be the biggest piece of shit ever. I'm not even giving it any attention. That to me is, kind of crazy because it's like, how do you know that? Oh, you don't. You're just assuming that. Okay, that's fine. But the point is, like, yeah, even if the game was a success and was very good and, reviewed well, but putting reviews aside, because, people don't really care about what game journalists have to say. Let's just say it got a really good community rating, and most people love it. There's always still going to be those people that are like, nah. And that's fine. For me, it's the amount of people. When you see something being, like, for example, every time we see Ghost of Yotei now, there's going to be an influx of people being super critical of it. And I can't tell them they're wrong because that would be me assuming I know what happens. And I know the story of the game. And I know the philosophy and the agenda that Sucker Punch is bringing out here. I don't know that, but neither do they. So all I can really hope for, man, is that, I'll be honest, the most I could hope for is that Insomniac and Sucker Punch shut them up and shut me up too. Because I don't want to be turned off by these games, man. I don't want to feel like these games are going in directions that I just am not into. But if they are, then they are. I'm not going into it assuming that. But my hope is that it's just, no, everybody gets shut up because it's that good from start to finish. And you might have some weirdos out there that are like taking out a magnifying glass and be like, but look at this one really strange thing I found. And nobody's paying attention to them because everybody's busy enjoying the game. But right now, I think that we've seen enough products come out that have proven there is some validity. Like, unfortunately, and this is why I talk about the back and forth bonking over the head that constantly occurs, where it's like, unfortunately, there have been games that have come out that have proven, like, some of the accusations have been proven to be true in what they're trying to shove in your face and shove down your throat, and what they're trying to preach to you. And people that's where people start to get a little crazy, because they're like, oh shit. You know, those people that were yelling and being so intense about every game and so critical, they were right. But I think, you know, you got to keep in mind that, yeah, they were, yeah, what's the saying go? Like, a broken clock's right twice, you know. I forget how that saying goes, but it's just, you can't necessarily assume that they're right about it all, because there are many examples of them not being right as well. So I don't know. I just hope that we get to a point where games like Concord and the type of conversations, broken clock, right twice a day. There you go. So I did have it right. I just have so many different things like running through my head right now. I'm trying to like keep them in order. I just think we need the industry to get past this. I want to see less things like Concord. And I'm not just saying that in the sense of I want less 5v5 hero shooters. I'm just saying I want less bullshit. That's all. Like, I want less nonsense. I don't mind there's so many games I'm not interested in. There's so many games that are not for me. And that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with that. But PlayStation Studios, man, like, the reason why I've gravitated towards them so heavily is because they, like, most of what they did spoke to me and meant something. And I'm like, this is awesome. And I just don't want to see that tarnished. I don't want to see that ruined by either Sony being overly ambitious or by some fucking political agenda that, you know, doesn't need to be inserted and shouldn't be inserted into games. You know? I don't want to see either of those things occur. And I feel like Concord is kind of the epitome of both of those things. And because it's the epitome of both of those things, it confirms to me that both of these things are real. Regardless of what I want to believe, it is real that Sony is getting they're flying too close to the sun, man. It is real that there are development teams that choose to exist in a bubble where they're going to wear their political statements and beliefs on their sleeve and put it right there on display in the next game that they're going to try to sell you. And that is what I want to see less of. You know, I just want I want that to just go away so we can get back to what really matters, which is, can we just get back to what you're good at, Sony, and do that more consistently. And I don't think they've strayed that far, to be honest. Like, Sony's big, you know, they got a lot of moving parts. Even when we look at this year, it's like they have done good things that I've thoroughly enjoyed. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend, and I think this is what too many people are willing to do. It's like you could be right 8 times out of 10, but there are just so many people where the only thing they're going to focus on are the 2 times you were wrong. They will completely ignore and disregard the 8 times you were right, but they will absolutely remind you every day, every chance they get, of those 2 times you were wrong. And I don't want to turn into that either. And I'm not trying to be that. I do so many streams and I have so many conversations that, you know, I have so much proof that that's not what I've turned into or what I've done, because I just don't think it's fair. I think it's, we need to maintain a proper, balanced criticism, not something that becomes disingenuous and becomes hyperbolic and just frankly not true. So I guess we're going to find out. I think 2025 will be a big year in the sense that it's going to be an important year. I think 2025 is going to be the year where we really figure out how Sony's going to operate under these two new CEOs, and these two new CEOs reporting to Hiroki Totoki. Like, I can kind of forgive Sony in a way that, like, all right, maybe Jim Ryan really was responsible for a lot of these decisions, and he made these decisions years ago, and because games take years to make, sure. Like, I'm not just going to, like, throw Concord on Jim Ryan, because it's not that simple, but, it's going to take some time to kind of either undo some of these things or, right the ship, as you put it here, Josh. It's going to take a little bit more time because maybe Jim Ryan really did throw the ship way off course. And that's fine. That's fine. But I just hope that's what's happening, And that's why I think 2025 will be a year where we really begin to see, like, is that happening? Did Sony lose all the money they made from Helldivers 2 on Concord? That's a great question. I don't think so. How much money do you think they've made on Helldivers 2? I can tell you they definitely lost it all on Bungie. Concord, I don't know. Bungie, for sure. Yeah, for sure. MBG, we need to see if Herman greenlights new live service games and what those will look like. Yeah, that's true too. That's true. Assuming that they do have more live service games they're spooling up. I mean, they made it pretty clear in the email that they're still sticking with live service games. So I would imagine we're going to hear about it. And there is that Project Gummy Bears. There was that one piece of concept art that they showed, or I don't think we ever got confirmation if that was actually concept art. It seemed like it was. Like, people were saying, like, this is concept art for Project Gummy Bears. It was, like, floating around. And I hope it's not true. Like, because I'm not trying to, like, again, I'm not trying to immediately assume, but I don't know, man. It's like, I look at that concept art and I'm like, so we're doing this again, huh? Did I fix my camera? It seems to be okay now. I'm pretty sure anytime my camera freezes, it's because my PC needs an update. Because ever since I updated my PC, it's been running fine. Now that I said that, though, it'll probably freeze. Rudy says, I love gummy bears. I like gummy bears too, but still have my concerns. Damn, Carl. Who knows what that game's going to be like? Dude, listen, if Sony's going to be so fucked, man, if like the upcoming live service games that they still have yet to reveal, if they're like all based in this kind of direction of we need to appeal to the wider market, I think they're going to be fucked. I think, you know what I think the biggest one will be? The Horizon live service game. That one, I think, will be the most important, because if that fails, I think Sony's cooked in the live service sector for a good long time. Because that, out of everything that they've worked on in multiplayer live service, that's the one that should succeed, because you would have to make a string of decisions that would be so detrimental to the game in order to get it to fail. You know what I mean? But it seems like that live service Horizon game's going to look like Genshin Impact. And I don't know, like, how much does that automatically hurt the game? I don't know. I mean, people can be pretty critical of games just because of art style alone. I don't think it's fair, but that is what we know about that game so far. Luke Vadergs, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. 20th super chat as well. Thank you, buddy. I'll just call you Luke. You're saying, why did Herman Hulse say yesterday they're going to be putting games on new platforms and they need to be strategic? What are we going to do if a game ends up on Xbox? Nothing. Honestly, Luke, like if Sony puts a game on Xbox, it is what it is. They are Sony's putting Marathon on Xbox, dude. I still don't think Sony's willing to do that because, again, I think they see that as like they're extending a line to Xbox when there's literally no need to do that. If Xbox was a massive platform that was as big as Switch, like maybe I could get why they would do it, but it's the smallest platform, you know, and it's a platform they're in competition with. So it's one of these things where I would struggle to see them doing that. But if they did, it is what it is. I mean, I told people this a year ago, or not a year ago, like 6 months ago, and I still maintain this, like, expect anything, man, when it comes to Sony. Expect the unexpected, because times are changing. Sony as a company is changing. The PlayStation brand is changing. Many things in gaming as a whole are changing, and they're changing quite rapidly. So what are we going to do? We're going to saw PlayStations in half. That's where we're going to send a message to Sony. Get your chainsaws out. Get your sledgehammers out. Throw them out a window. Record it. Put it on the internet. Tag Sony. Tag Herman Hulse. Got to send them a message. Kazjam, you're saying, could you see Sony porting PS4 games on Switch 2? Yes. I could. I absolutely could. Again, I'm not anticipating it, but it would make logical sense. Think of it like this. Let's say by the time Spider-Man 3 is getting ready to come out, right? Spider-Man 3, 2028 or 9? I don't know. Maybe it'll even be like a PlayStation 6 launch game. I mean, by that point, it should be. I don't know. Could Spider-Man 3 come up? I don't know. Just imagine Spider-Man 3 comes out and they're like, we're just going to port Spider-Man 1 and 2 to Switch 2. Well, why would you do that? Well, because we want Switch players to know that Spider-Man 3 is coming. And if you want to continue, you're going to have to come buy a PlayStation 6 or a PS5. I don't know. I'm not saying I expect that to happen. I just am saying I could see Sony treating the Switch ecosystem potentially like the PC ecosystem. But I don't know, man. I'm going to finish watching that video that Josh sent me earlier because it seems like the feud between Sony and Nintendo is not... Like, I was under the impression that they're not really at each other's throats anymore. They don't really care. But apparently not. Apparently Sony, there's just still this deep-seated Like, I don't know, man. They're still battling. We just don't really see it very clearly, but they are still battling in a big way. And it's interesting because we've talked about the idea of Nintendo being competition to Sony. But Sony may... I mean, I think Sony's more likely to just be like, here's a PlayStation 6 remaster of Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2. I think they're much more likely to do that than be like, here's Spider-Man 1 and 2 on the Switch 2. Or maybe, dude, I don't know. Maybe we could see an approach in the future where, you know, some of these remasters they do, I don't know, maybe they could use the Switch 2 to justify PS6 remasters. Kind of like they're doing right now with PC, where it's like, did we really need a remake or a remaster of Until Dawn? It's like, no, but we wanted to bring it to PC. And you can't, you know, somebody might say, well, then just remaster it for PC. You can't really do that because then, you know, you can't turn to PlayStation 5 owners and be like, you're not getting this. You can't do that. So you got to release it on PS5 as well. So I could see them basically with the PlayStation 6 generation just being like, here's Spider-Man 1 being brought up for the PlayStation 6. Also, you know, Spider-Man Remake, PS6, also releasing on PC and Switch too. Sounds awful. I mean, it does sound awful. It does, but I'm trying to, you know, think about the way Sony operates these days. Luke, you're saying you have to stop Herman. If PlayStation games go to Xbox, it's over for Sony to lose 20 million people instantly. I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. Sony, you're tearing me apart. I'm sorry, Luke. There's nothing we can do. Herman's going to do what Herman's going to do, bro. Herman's probably on the phone with Phil right now. Bet you that's what they tried. They tried to offload Concord. Phil, do you guys want Concord? How much are you willing to pay for Concord? They couldn't sell it. They couldn't offload it. I don't know what Sony's going to do when it comes to porting their games beyond Lego Horizon. Listen, Lego Horizon, I want to make it clear. Lego Horizon, the only reason that might be on Switch is because Lego requested it. And basically, the negotiations wouldn't have went through. And you know, they wouldn't have been able to do this if they didn't agree to put it on the Switch. For all we know, you know what sounds more likely to me? I bet you Lego was like, we want it on Xbox too. And Sony was like, no. And they're like, why not? We'll do Switch. We're not doing Xbox. Like, I bet you that's what the conversation went like. Because I don't know, man. There's nothing. Think about it this way. Sony has never willingly put any of their games. Keyword being willingly. Sony has never willingly put any of their games on other consoles. Any game that's on another console right now is because their hand was forced. Marathon. The only way Bungie agreed to be purchased is if they were allowed to release it on Xbox. Okay. MLB The Show. MLB threatened to take the license from them if they didn't agree to put it on Xbox and Game Pass. Okay. Lego. You see what I'm saying? But if the game does well, then what? Well, then maybe Sony maybe is looking over a little bit like, maybe they have a thought. And I think that's smart of Sony. That's probably why Sony's totally okay with putting it on Switch, because it is a Lego game. And it's like, is us putting this Lego game with this Lego Horizon game, is this going to stop people from, is this going to convince people to leave PlayStation? Of course not. Of course not. But yeah, I saw that saying Black Ops 6 developers walked out. I read briefly a snippet from an article. Apparently it's like their QA team or something. Their QA team just like walked out, which is not good. So I don't know, man. We might be getting future Black Ops 6 updates coming in hot. They're going to be patched over and over again. I did see the PS Plus monthly games. I don't know. The Hot Wheels 2 game, that's, I guess, maybe my son would want to play that. Ghostwire Tokyo, that's it. I will say Ghostwire Tokyo is good, dude. I enjoyed it. I played that when it first came out, and I platinumed it. That was a fun game. I recommend it. All right, let's see where we're at. So we got about 10 more minutes till we hit the 2-hour mark. I think I'm going to keep this stream a little bit shorter today because, truthfully, a lot of what I'm discussing today, I already discussed at length yesterday, but it just felt like I had to have a dedicated stream talking about this. So I'll hang out with you guys for about 10 more minutes. We'll chat. If you guys want to do any more fan funding, any more super chats, membership gifts, anything like that, we got about 10 more minutes. So Ghostwire's Game Pass slot. Ghostwire's pretty good. It's not the best, but I did enjoy it. Will I go over the marathon updates and stuff next stream? Yeah, I'll have to. I do feel bad about that. I was going to cover them yesterday, but the marathon updates, it sounds promising, right? Or it sounds better. Like, I'm glad you let me know that. I apparently I misunderstood. I thought it was going to be like a hero shooter, but it's going to be a class based, I believe. Like, you will be able to customize the like loadouts of the characters and stuff like that. I think you mentioned like it'll be kind of like Black Ops 3 specialists, which is pretty cool. I did play Black Ops 3 and the specialists were pretty fun. They weren't bad. So that sounds better to me than like a full hero shooter. I could get into Marathon. I got to see gameplay, of course, but Marathon, out of all of the live service games, because I like the fact that it's an extraction shooter. Like, I don't know if people caught on to this yesterday, but if you watch that video from Bungie, they were like, the game's not going to be for everybody. You know, like they're saying the opposite, which is interesting to me. They're like, yeah, it's going to be kind of hardcore. And that interests me because that means it's actually going to have like a kind of skill ceiling and a learning curve that sometimes I really fall deep into those games. You know, like it reminds me of PUBG. I mean, PUBG is maybe not the best example because everybody played PUBG, but PUBG is not an easy game. Like that game, you had to learn. There's this very, very, very high skill ceiling in that game. And you had to play a lot to fully understand how to be good at that game, how to win at that game, the mechanics, the tactics, the meta, everything. And yeah, that's true too. You're saying it immediately has a larger potential player base by releasing on all consoles and PC. Yeah, that is true too. I hope Marathon is good because like the thing is, I'm not rooting against any of these games. Like I hope Fair Games is good. I don't think it will be, but I think Marathon, just the concept of what that game will be, unless it turns out to play, if it turns out to be a very different gameplay experience than what I'm imagining, you know, then maybe I would not enjoy it. But it sounds, as of right now, like it has potential. Will it be free to play? I think it's going to be a $40 title. Pretty sure it's going to be a $40 title. Did I end up watching Skill Up's Dragon Age review? I actually didn't get around to that. Maybe I could bring that up now. I don't know that I'm going to watch the whole thing, but we could watch some. Because I pretty much said everything I had to say about Concord and whatnot. So give me a moment. I'll bring it up.
Final Fantasy 16 review, which is to say that reviews are opinions. This is my opinion and my opinion only. I expect that there will be a broad range of opinions on Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I encourage you to seek them out. I do not have a monopoly on truth. As I've said many times before, I'm just a nerd with a microphone and a YouTube account. My opinion is no more or less valuable than anybody else's. Okay? Alright, so Dragon Age the Veilguard is a colossal disappointment. I really can't put it any other way. I spent 50 hours playing this, and it was time I desperately wish that I could get back. I started having my doubts at around the 10-hour mark. I was thoroughly checked out at the 20-hour mark, and the remaining 30 hours were just excruciatingly painful as I was forced to suffer through the endless morass of banality that is Dragon Age the Veilguard. In many ways, Veilguard is a bigger disappointment than Anthem was. Like, if I was to hand LeBron a tennis racket, I'd expect to see some pretty shitty tennis. BioWare never had any business making a looter shooter, and so when Anthem flopped, its failure was easily explained, easily reconciled. But if I hand LeBron a basketball, I expect to see some fucking points on the board, and it's impossible to imagine a bigger home court advantage than this for BioWare. The Dragon Age franchise, one of their most beloved and most successful, no pressure from EA to cram in all sorts of live service bullshit like it was meant to have at one point, but they pivoted away from that years ago. There's no in-game cash up here, there was obviously plenty of development time and budget, there was the freedom for BioWare to make a BioWare-ass BioWare game, without any compromises, and without any excuses. In no way, shape, or form did BioWare meet the moment and capitalize on the opportunity that was handed to them. Dragon Age the Veilguard apes the most superficial elements of a BioWare game, making no effort to modernize what is a now fairly dated formula, while delivering absolutely none of the writing, characterization, and imagination that made its previous games so great. The writing is frankly terminal. It lacks any nuance or wit or wisdom. It cannot communicate ideas except to say them aloud.
Bro, he called the writing terminal. Holy shit.
To the camera. It manufactures petty, unbelievable tension because it doesn't know how to create anything more real, and it's too scared to ever be truly confronting or dark for fear that it might make the audience uncomfortable. Every interaction between the companions feels like HR is in the room, and every interaction led by the main character, Rook, sounds like he's addressing an under-12 soccer team before a semi-final, or teaching toddlers how to properly share toys. The way you build relationships with your companions is so woefully outdated, drawn-out quest lines completely divorced from the main plot, starring disposable villains and recycling the same settings, enemies, and bosses you find elsewhere. The romance system feels equally antiquated, heavily reliant on the "we'll bang, okay" button, even when it doesn't make sense for that to be an option, with no supporting systems behind it to make your romance decisions feel believable or consequential. The world design is so weird. I have never encountered worlds quite like this. They feel more like Overwatch maps than actual explorable spaces, and they're littered with puzzles so mind-numbingly stupid that I wonder how little BioWare must think of our ability to solve puzzles. And the combat is like, man, shallow is too kind a word. The lack of enemy variety, the sponginess of those enemies, how limited your control over party members is, it all makes combat so utterly mindless and so breathtakingly repetitive. Let me put it this way, I spoke to two other reviewers who both ended up lowering the difficulty to the easiest setting, not because it was hard, but because it was just so drawn out and so boring. I've never done that before for any game that I've reviewed, but I did it at the 40-hour mark here, and I swear to God, I wish I did it 20 hours earlier. I know how brutal all of this sounds, and I want to be super clear that I desperately wanted it to be different. I really did. I am aware of the stakes surrounding this game and what it means for BioWare's future, and I was praying so hard that BioWare's next game would be a fucking banger, and that the future of the studio would be secure, and that we'd all be looking forward to a Mass Effect game. But I cannot say any of those things, because the honest truth is that barring a few exceedingly rare moments, there wasn't a single aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard that I actually enjoyed, and there are very few games that I play that I can say that of.
I know you're hurt.
Holy shit, man.
But the rest of us need to do something.
He is that was a hell of an opening. So I'm assuming he gives it a 10 out of 10. I don't know. I mean, look, I'll watch some more, but I I don't know. We'll continue on here.
Like most BioWare games, Dragon Age the Veilguard begins here in character creation. It is flexible in the sense that it has plenty of options and sliders, but it's all limited by one central constraint, and that's the game's very stylized aesthetic. Characters do not look like real people. They look like Pixar or DreamWorks characters. You think I'm exaggerating? This is Prince Charming from Shrek. Are you going to tell me this man wouldn't slot right into the Veilguard aesthetic? Man, you could drop him in right now as a companion character and no one would bat an eyelid. It's obviously a choice that BioWare made. You don't accidentally end up with characters that look like this. On one hand, I respect it because they really swung for something different here. Absolutely. On the other hand, I really dislike how these characters look. I just don't like it. And I think it's a massive downgrade versus what this series has previously offered. Like, this is the new Morrigan, for example. If you've never played Dragon Age before, then this might not mean anything to you, but if you have played it, then this rendition is gonna look pretty weird. There are other returning characters making cameos in this game, stuff BioWare has asked us not to spoil, so I can't show it to you, but putting the new models side by side with the old models, it's pretty crazy to see how much worse they look here in Veilguard. Nothing compares though to what they did to the Qunari. Like, holy hell, I have no idea what they were thinking. This is how they used to look in the Inquisition, like truly badass and intimidating. And this is how they look in Veilguard. I mean, how on earth could BioWare have landed on these designs and thought, yep, that's it, ship it? The Qunari redesign looks comically bad, and it's also kind of lazy because now instead of looking like a truly distinct race with a different facial structure, the Qunari now just look like humans with horns. It really sucks. These character designs are distracting and they weaken the game's ability to deliver emotional moments. I don't think your characters need to look realistic for you to have a strong connection to them. There are millions of games that disprove that point. But this uncanny valley thing, this half human, half cartoon thing, it catches on the eye the same way an off note catches on the ear. It's hard not to be distracted by just how odd everyone looks. And in the more tense emotional scenes, I found that their fake plastic faces made it harder for me to buy into whatever emotional distress they were selling. This is further compounded by BioWare's approach to facial animations, which is extremely outdated in 2024, especially for a game where you spend so much time looking at characters' faces. Like, take this example when my character is angrily trying to convince the Grey Wardens to act.
We don't have time to play Who's the Greyest Warden. You need to shut up and listen. The threat is real. The gods are coming, and they're bringing the blight with them.
Or this clip when Rook is dressing down the team after a setback.
Last I checked, there are 2 gods out there. They've got plans, and we're falling behind. And if it wasn't clear enough after Demeter's crossing, it's clear now. They'll rain disease and death across Thedas unless we stop them.
In both instances, you really can't see the emotion that the voice actor is delivering. Compare those to this outburst from Cassandra 9 years ago in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Then we looked for Hawk, but he was gone too. We thought it all connected, but no. It was just you. You kept him from us.
Now look, for my money, Cassandra's face here looks angry and expressive. I'm not only hearing her rage, but I am seeing it too. And Veilguard never manages to make these two things line up. Setting aside the more contemporary comparisons you could make to stuff like Baldur's Gate 3 or Cyberpunk or Guardians of the Galaxy, BioWare was doing faces and facial animations better nearly a decade ago, and that sadly is commentary that could be extended to almost every aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard.
Damn, dude. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, even though I haven't really paid any attention to Dragon Age, that comparison he just showed, actually, the 2 comparisons he showed, where it's like, here's what they did 10 years ago for Dragon Age, was it Inquisition, and here's what you get today. Kind of crazy. I mean, I know it's a different art style and all, but you could tell something is lacking there. Laman, you're saying, EBG, bless you and the family. I played Veilguard early. This game will flop and deserves it. I'm angry. 90% of the gamers don't want DI crap. Don't buy. Yeah, I'm curious to see if he touches on that in this review at all. But I'm also, because I've been hearing so much stuff about Dragon Age, you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to watch this whole thing, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's a good review. I'm glad you guys recommended it to me. Let's continue on here.
One exception to this, I think, is the visual design of environments, which are regularly stunning. I don't like how these spaces are laid out or what you do in them, but they do look really nice. There's a range of settings from cityscapes to forests to darkened swamps to old hollowed out grey warden fortresses, and they all look great in their own way. They each feel visually cohesive with unique architectural styles and colour palettes that create a very strong sense of space and place. As I said, I never enjoyed being in these environments, but I did enjoy looking at them. I will also say that Valgard runs extraordinarily well on a high-end PC, which doesn't always happen all the time, by the way, right? I played this at 4K ultra settings, ray tracing enabled, and even without DLSS frame generation, I was still able to hit over 100 frames per second very easily. With lower settings, with lower resolutions, with ray tracing off, and with frame generation as an option, I think there's a huge amount of headroom for this game to run really well on lower end PCs, but I haven't personally tested that, and I also couldn't test console performance. I also do note that this game is on Steam day one instead of just being on the EA launcher, which is fantastic. It's also Steam Deck verified, which is great. Most impressive of all, it's DRM free, which is a boon for not only performance, but also for game preservation. I really applaud EA for making these moves, and hopefully it's something that they'll continue to do in their future releases. The bottom line, when it comes to visuals and performance, Dragon Age the Valgard is yet another reminder of how much more important art direction is over technical wizardry. Yes, the environments look really nice and the game runs well, but the main deliverable of a BioWare experience is a compelling saga starring a cast of characters who feel believable. The weird, stylized, waxy way these characters look is off-putting, and when combined with how stiff and unresponsive their faces are, Valgard has immediately hamstrung itself in its ability to deliver on the promise of a BioWare game. A promise that is then thoroughly broken when we start looking at the writing underpinning all of this.
I wield the power of the light. People are dying right now. You need to listen. They might cost me still life. And you didn't think to tell me. Bring that first one down!
Okay, so we're going to talk about the writing of this game now, and in so doing, I'm going to spoil some minor things. No major events or reveals, but some little stuff, so if you're sensitive to that, then you can skip ahead to the timestamp on screen. I'll give you a minute to do that now. Okay, here we go. Dragon Age games have, generally speaking, been pretty dark. I mean, the first game opens with a ritual where you drink demon blood to join a sacred order, and one of the other guys doesn't survive that ritual. He just kind of dies right there on the spot, and then another guy freaks out and he's like, no, please don't make me do that. And then Duncan, who's conducting the ritual, knows that there's no way to back out of this ceremony, so he murders that dude in cold blood before whispering in his ear,
I am sorry.
Now, if that moment is like an 8 out of 10 in terms of how dark you might expect your fantasy to be, Dragon Age the Valgard never gets above like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. It was genuinely shocking to me to see just how safe and cheery and bright and G-rated this whole thing was. Like, genuinely shocked, because there are precisely 0 moments where something happens that made me go, oh shit, alright, now we're talking. I used the word banality in my intro, and one of the biggest reasons this game feels so banal is because when you eventually realize that nothing bad is ever going to happen, you stop hoping for something interesting or surprising to happen. You just surrender yourself to the endless stream of predictable, inoffensive fantasy tropes. In place of more serious, more dark events and characters is the embrace of a more playful, silly tone. It's about keeping it light, like Balara here talking about the fact that 2 elven gods are now out to destroy the world.
Oh, you know, just finding out that 3 of my gods are out there trying to end the world. Why wouldn't I be okay?
Emmerich is a necromancer, and I know that sounds a little scary, raising the dead and commanding them as your minions, but don't worry, BioWare is not going to let you get freaked out by all that scary death stuff. Emmerich happens to be a lovely old gentleman. He is dapper, he is proper, he delights in pleasantries, and he has a servant, a lovable skeleton named Manfred, who happily dotes on Emmerich and screeches with glee whenever he's mentioned. He's not the only companion with a pet though. Davram also has a baby griffin named Asan, and he can be a little rowdy sometimes, like here when Manfred and Asan are squabbling over something.
Okay, that's enough. Quiet now. Fine. Who wants a treat?
Now look, I know that you could go back to previous Dragon Age games and pull the same clips that show the same
Bro, that's like me with Boss and Luna at this point.
lighthearted silliness. Lighthearted fun and humor has always been a part of every great BioWare game. But what I'm trying to communicate here is that there's a lot more of these moments in Valgard, but more importantly, there's a complete absence of anything dark to counterbalance them. As such, the overall tone of this game is silly and juvenile. Its unwillingness to confront darker themes also extends to a total unwillingness to create any meaningful conflict between companions. Conflict between companions is a really important part of these sorts of cinematic RPGs. It not only creates narrative tension, but also forces important gameplay decisions, like who do you side with in a real moment of truth situation, right? Dragon Age the Valgard has none of that. Zero. Companions never have prolonged, substantive disagreements about anything. They just get along almost all the time. And when they do express some sort of disagreement about something, it is so lukewarm and then resolved so quickly that the whole thing feels entirely cosmetic. Like during a mission, Lucanus makes a mistake and Davram calls him out on it very briefly. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is the start of the first inter-team conflict. Nope. Like an hour later, the very next conversation that we all have together is this.
You two done fighting then? I can't have you at each other's throats.
Lucanus is still an assassin. Kills people for money.
And Davrin's still self-righteous. Judgmental, too. Typical warden. Ah, no offense.
If we let that get in the way of stopping the gods...
We won't. We cannot.
They were never at each other's throats, by the way. They literally had one perfectly civil conversation where no one even raised their voice, and now they've, patched it up. However, BioWare clearly want to create some semblance of conflict between team members, so they instead focus on petty squabbles. Like here, Emmerich wants to bring too many books to a camping trip that Harding is planning, and Harding is upset about that. Just watch the clip.
Harding, does it really matter if Emmerich brings 8 books?
9, actually.
And Emmerich? So what if Harding is fine sleeping on dirt?
Not all the time.
This is the sort of conflict that Valgard is constantly generating between team members, just arguing about utter nonsense. And did you see how Rook needed to sort it out at the end? He talks to them like they're children. Like, here's another example of him sorting out a disagreement between Tash and Emmerich when they're arguing about the fact that Tash doesn't like necromancy.
You two could still learn things together you'd never find out alone. Emmerich, you clearly find talking about dragons boring.
What? How? Who doesn't like dragons?
Aren't you curious why Tash likes them as much as you like necromancy?
The question crossed my mind.
And maybe Emmerich could help demystify magic, Tash.
See what I mean? That is not how you speak to adults. That is how you speak to a toddler when you are teaching them to share their Optimus Prime toy with their little brother. It speaks.
Okay, dude, I gotta admit, I thought he was maybe exaggerating earlier when he was talking about the bad dialogue and writing and like sounding like children. Holy shit, dude. Do you think this is how they settle arguments at BioWare between developers? Oh, man. Laman, you're saying what upsets me the most with Valgard is the fact dialogues are so intent on promoting transgenderism. It's really shocking. Firestorm, incoming day one. I saw some of that on I saw that on Twitter, and yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know why it's causing a bit of a war online, but I don't know. I guess I'd have to play it myself to see, but it seems like they're pretty they're being pretty aggressive with it, from what I can tell. The chat seems like Chat GPT or AI dialogue. Yeah. Saying it's ramming it in our face every time. I mean, that's just cringe to me, man. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I get it. Like, if there are people where they feel like that speaks to them and they want to play it, but dude, listen, I'm gonna be honest. I'm glad I never got into Dragon Age, because seeing what I'm seeing And the way like a lot of hardcore Dragon Age fans are reacting, where they're like, dude, what did they do? It just makes me glad that I never got into the game or the series. So I'm just a spectator, you know. Don't buy it, MBG, I warned you.
Speaks to a broader problem, that being a lack of subtlety and wisdom in the writing. This game cannot surface any ideas without just saying them aloud, which leads to this endless stream of exposition-laden personal introspection monologues, like when Harding tells us that she's a bit of a people pleaser.
She hates it.
No, I don't hate it. It's really nice. Temperature.
I won't be upset if you don't like coffee.
He really wouldn't.
I know, but sorry. It's just this thing I do sometimes.
Acting so people will like you?
It sounds terrible when you say it like that. I know I don't need to do it. I just do.
Or here, when Nev opens up about the fact that she really just wants to prove that she can be relied on.
You can't count on a lot here. When I started, I wasn't going to save Minrathus, never mind Thedas. But if I could take a job and follow through, well, maybe people could count on me.
These clips alone aren't enough to convince you of what I'm saying, but I promise you that every emotional exchange has this sort of stuff in it. Rather than letting these sorts of character traits or insecurities surface through action or through the intuition of others, these characters just blurt them out all the time. There's nothing to read into or imagine about these characters because they simply tell you everything about themselves with this point-blank dialogue. And the way this dialogue is delivered makes this all the more painful because BioWare can't surface any of it in the main questline. All of it happens in chats at the home base or during companion missions. And this is where we start crossing over into criticisms of the game's structure, but Dragon Age the Veilguard feels extremely outdated because of its inability to unify its companion stories with the main story. This is sort of how old BioWare games were. You would pursue companion storylines that were quite separate from the main storyline, but we've come a long way since then, and multiple games, most notably Baldur's Gate 3, have shown us that you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. You can deepen your connection to your companions both in and out of the main questline. Companion questlines are more deeply interwoven into that main questline. It doesn't feel like you're making these hard switches from save the world mode to go and pick flowers with your buddy mode. There certainly is some of that in those other games, don't get me wrong, but the overall calibration and pacing of it feels more integrated and more seamless. Not so here in Veilguard. When you're doing the main questline, there are precious few moments when you also happen to be progressing a companion storyline. That all happens in companion quests, which are each their own totally disconnected storyline, starring their own generic villain of the day style antagonist. And these quests are all meted out to you at the same time, meaning that you complete a major milestone in the main questline, and that immediately unlocks like 6 or 7 companion missions, and if you're going to stay on top of them, you're just doing them one after the other. The main storyline is completely on hold in that moment. This is at its worst at the end of the game, where there's a literal 10-hour stretch where all you are doing is companion quests, because it's your last chance to do them, and the game doesn't let you finish these storylines any earlier, so you're just doing them one after the other. And look, I know that's very common for these sorts of games, and if these storylines were good, I probably wouldn't mind all that much, but they are not good. They are boring, and they are badly written, and they see you exploring all of the same locations you've already been to, fighting enemies and bosses you've already fought dozens of times before. It's a major shortcoming of this game. There is absolutely zero variety in mission design. It's all either walking behind your companion while they talk, or killing enemies. There's no like necromancy mission that sees you commanding an army of skeletons, no stealth mission with Lucanus to sneakily assassinate a target. You don't ever officiate over a joining ceremony with Davram and have to choose whether or not to execute a recruit who tries to flee. It's just...
Damn, bro. I feel like I get... trying to see... I'm going to skip to the end here to just kind of get his... the summary. Because I feel like I get... I get the idea, you know?
To the lowest setting just because they were so over it, and I cannot tell you how much better this experience was when I did that. Combat did not become better, it just meant that I no longer had to suffer through it, as enemies would die in just a few quick hits instead of soaking up dozens of them. My strong advice to you is that if you do plan to play this game, play it on normal difficulty for like the first 10 or so hours. By that point, you've honestly seen everything the Combat Sandbox has to offer, every ability, every enemy type, every boss type. So just lower the difficulty at that point and focus on the story, because yeah, I really wish I had taken that advice far, far earlier.
Everyone suit up. All hands for this one.
So I want to be clear that the finale of this game is actually fantastic. It's a 2-hour gauntlet, and while the combat side of it remains the same, there are multiple impactful decisions to be made, there are multiple meaningful revelations, there are multiple thrilling set pieces full of action and emotion. Playing that final 2 hours, you cannot but think to yourself, imagine if the entire game was like this. But the reality is that the rest of the game is not remotely like that. The rest of the game is meandering and dull and childish, and all of its systems are so surface level. And that is my biggest criticism of Dragon Age the Veilguard. It is just so surface level. It has companions, but neither them nor their stories are any deeper than a puddle. It has a romance system, so it ticks that box, but it feels so awkward and cheap. It regularly offers you the choice to choose between this thing or that thing, but those decisions don't really mean anything. It has puzzles and side activities that feel almost placeholder, and it has this very flashy looking combat system that presents really well in a preview slice, but when you have to spend any more than a few hours with it, you see just how hollow and repetitive it is. I really struggled a great deal with how to write this review, and that's not like performative hand-wringing when I say that, by the way. As I've matured in this job, I've become far more aware of how I talk about games, striving to do so in a way that is both critical and constructive. And so as I look back over this script, I really wish I had more constructive things to say. But the truth is, I don't, and I'm no good to anyone if I'm not totally honest about how I feel about a video game. I would again stress though that this is just my opinion, and I know there are people out there who do enjoy this video game, so my only ask is that in addition to watching this review, please go and seek out the more positive ones as well. Find people with whom this game resonated, because this game might resonate with you too, and as I've said many times before, I would hate for my take to deprive you of an experience that you might love. For me though, Dragon Age the Veilguard was so disappointing that I cannot muster any enthusiasm or excitement for the Mass Effect project that BioWare are currently working on. I hope they get the chance to make that game, and I hope it succeeds where Veilguard failed, but if either of those things are to happen, it's going to be against all odds, because I think Veilguard will mark a permanent shift in the way we talk about BioWare, and it's a shift that makes me really sad.
Well, sounds like Skill Up really liked it, man. Just kidding. Yeah, oh. Can't say it's a game I'll be playing. All right, let's see where we're at. Okay, yeah, so we're well over the 2-hour mark. Guys, this is where I'm going to wrap today's stream up. I wanted to throw that in there at the end because I told you guys I was going to watch a little bit of that yesterday and react to it, but never got around to it, so there we go. Yeah, glowing review right there. Guys, that does it for the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with me today. I also want to make sure I thank everybody who dropped any super chats or support today. I do very much appreciate it. I can only do what I do here because you make it possible. And I just want to ask you to hit that like button on your way out. And yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Devil Shooter. He does the timestamps for the streams. Devil Shooter, thank you so much for what you do, man. If you guys see him in the comments, show him some love and some thanks. And yeah, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, I saw that too. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next one. So be on the lookout. And yeah, that does it. All right, guys. Until next time, take care.